Watson. I'm here with the Boilermaker Urban Initiative, and I am excited to have a guest with me today. Lis DeGironimo is joining us to share a little bit about her story and her journey to the Boilermaker and all the ways that she's been connected with this race, and actually something pretty special that she's involved in this year that we wanted to share with you. So Lis, I just want to give the people watching just a little bit of your background. You mentioned to me that the Boilermaker has kind of been a part of your experience for your life. Can you share a little bit about how that's worked out for you?
Yep, absolutely. From the first Boilermaker, we were aware of the race because my family lived about 3/4 of a mile from the start line, right between the Proctor Parks on a little dead-end street. And every year, when I was young, we used to come and watch, and some of our neighbors ran those early races when the full, Culver Ave wasn't full. And it was fun to just cheer, and it would only take maybe a minute or two to watch the runners go by. But that was a yearly thing that we did. We set out chairs, my parents set out chairs, and we were down just waiting for the run. As we got older, I wasn't really a runner because I have some knee issues, but we tried to participate in the race in any way possible. During the 5K training runs, I did some of those because it was better for my knees, but I wanted to run the full race. And when I was 30, I decided that this was the year. I had a friend that inspired me that she ran every 10 years. And I said, you know what, that sounds like a great idea. And I started to train for the run on my 30th year. But as I mentioned, the Boilermaker's been sort of watching the race has been special for us. And when they had the walks, my parents would participate in the walks and take my kids with them. So they would always do the Boilermaker walks when they had it. And then obviously the party at the end.
Obviously the party at the end. I really like that. I'm actually thinking about those early days of the Boilermaker, and I'm thinking of you guys watching this. Maybe some of you remember the early starts when it was not the hours of watching people come by that it is now, and it was, a few people just kind of out there for a nice run, and kind of cool to see that build up and become something so different now. Yes, that's a great experience.
Oh, it's just wonderful. When I was young, we didn't see that full thing, but the kids, my kids did, and they were always excited about watching all the runners because it was a sea of people, and in the hills coming, you could see them coming up to the crest of the hill before the first mile point, and it was just incredible. If you haven't seen the start of the race in person, I encourage people to try to get into one of the side streets because it's just incredible to see everyone there. I mean, it's thick at the end too, but the start is just special.
You are so right. Everybody sort of lined up down the exit way, and there's just this mob of people. But I love the idea of the waves of the people.
Yes.
When you can just kind of see them coming up and cresting the hill. And if you haven't been at the start, this could be your year. It's really a good idea to be able to see everybody in one spot. By the end, they're all in different spots. So that's remarkable. So you made this commitment to do it every 10 years and have done that through the past couple of decades. But this year is actually not one of those decade years. This year, there's something else happening that's making it a little bit more special.
Yes.
Talk about what changed this year and how that brought you into the race.
Sure. So 30, I ran it, it was fine. 40, I trained for it, was up to about 8.5 miles, and then I had some IT band issues, and for you runners, you know what that is, and I couldn't do the race, but last year I turned 50 and I decided this was it, so I trained. I felt great during the race, and as I mentioned, because of my knees, I'm sort of in semi-retirements, and I go back to the 5K between. But I was asked this year to run on a charity bib for the hospice organization, and there was no way I would say no to that because of what they have done for us during this past year. My mom passed away in January, and she spent her last 7 weeks at the Siegenthaler Center under hospice care, and I would do absolutely anything for that organization.
And first of all, before we get into your mom and how she had that great experience there, let's just talk a little bit about the Charity Bib, because I'm not sure everybody knows even what that is, and it's a program that we run. Talk a little bit about just the Charity Bib project in itself, the program, and how that works.
Yes, so the Boilermaker determines charitable organizations each year to be part of the Charity Bib program, and they give the organization a bib, a number of bibs that they can basically do fundraising. So for each bib, they recommend at least $500, and that money goes right back to the organization for the Charity Bib. And for that, the runners, we fundraise for that Charity Bib.
So it allows you a chance to be part of the Boilermaker and be part of the event, but
Yes.
actually be able to give back to the community on a much greater
Absolutely.
scale.
Absolutely.
By being, being part of something bigger than you even.
Yes. There are wonderful organizations in the Utica area, and this Boilermaker Charity Bib program really helps them, and it brings the community in for support. And so there's just a number of wonderful organizations that benefit, and hospice is one of them.
Excellent. So you mentioned that your mother passed away this year. I'm so sorry. I've been in that experience as well. So I know what it means when you lose somebody so close to you. But the blessings that come out of it is that you find organizations and resources and people like what you found at hospice.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about how you had that, what happened in your experience with them, and how that worked for you and for your mom?
Sure. In August 2017, my mom woke up with a massive stroke. So I had a call from my father. I was actually working out, got her to the hospital, and they were able to actually remove the clot as she was having her stroke. And it was a massive stroke. Had they not had that ability, she wouldn't have made it. She was able to gain many of her functions back. She was able to walk and swallow and have her mobility back, but she did lose her language center. So she wasn't able to communicate as well, but she was in and out of the hospital and had started having seizures. I mean, it's been a rough year and a half with her ill, and we've been in different rehab situations and different hospitalizations, and that was very difficult. She started going downhill again. Actually, after the Boilermaker last summer, she was able to come out and watch us run by, and that was wonderful to see her in her chair at the end of the street. It'll be tough this year, but she started going downhill again. And one of the things that can happen sometimes with stroke patients, she developed what they call vascular dementia and then some congestive heart failure. So last fall, she was really on a downward path. And it got to the point where the doctors recommended comfort care because we really had exhausted all the options to us. We had actually another neighbor who had resided at the Siegenthaler Center, and his family really had nothing but wonderful things to say. And when we were offered a bed for my mother there at the Siegenthaler Center, I said, this is wonderful. This is where she needs to be. And certainly that was the case. It was, she went there the week after Thanksgiving, and because of her language loss, her speech center, and she was having difficulty swallowing, but there were sort of tricks. I felt that I was almost at pretty much every shift change for nurses to try to explain, how to get her to drink and things. And I had a little note there, and my brother said, "You're driving these nurses crazy." And it's just like I just felt that I had to do it because my mother was such a caregiver to us. And once we got to hospice, the Siegenthaler Center, there's 4 suites for those of you that don't know that, and it's in New Hartford. It's a beautiful setting. Everyone has a suite, each of the 4 rooms, and then there's shared spaces. There's a shared kitchen, a shared living room, meditation room. There's a walking path, although we didn't use that. And there's bird feeders outside the rooms, and there's couches. There's a couch in the room and a table and chairs, and it's really like your home. And then getting to know the nurses, it's a very small staff. I believe there's about 7 nurses that we interacted with. But once they got to know her, I didn't have to worry anymore because I knew that if anything was amiss, they'd call me quickly. They got to know me. I got to know them. They got to know my mother, more importantly. And the care that they provided, I mean, I call them the angels on earth because very loving care and how she was bathed, and being on comfort care, in the hospital, they were giving her, pureed foods and things. And some days she could swallow, some days she couldn't. But we were able to bring in meals there, and the days she could eat, she wasn't restricted. We actually were able on Christmas to bring in a longer table. We brought in our linens and our china and everything, and we had our traditional Christmas meal. Luckily, my husband's the one that cooks it, but he was able, we live close by, just bring it in, warm it up there. And she ate the same meal that we did. So
Wow.
it was wonderful, because there was no way that she could be home, but we were able to share another Christmas meal there. So
That's amazing. I was so happy to talk with you when you mentioned this, because although I'm familiar with the Siegenthaler Center, and some of these people maybe that are watching might be aware of it too, I actually wasn't aware that they had 4 suites where you could have this kind of
Yes.
interaction and this sort of sense of being home,
Yes.
even though you weren't at home, but being able to have that care. You mentioned that there were 4, and I'm thinking people out there that don't know this might want a little more information. How does that compare to having them come to your house? How about whether they were in a nursing home or in an assisted care home? How does it compare to those?
Well, there's hospice for those who are terminally ill that would like to be at home. I mean, that's certainly an option, and the hospice will come to your house and they will work with you. They have a staff that travels. There's also Abraham House, which is a 2-bed facility, and the Siegenthaler, which is a 4. For us, the Siegenthaler was the option, because we weren't able to care for my mom at home because I work full time. My dad's elderly. The family members, we all work. So it wasn't possible for her to be at home. But for those that can be at home, they're there. Hospice does also offer services in some of the local nursing homes also, that a hospice nurse is assigned to the case and hospice workers, and they will attend to the person. But in our case, with my mom's difficulty in communication, the best thing for us was to have the smallest staff possible, and it worked out really well at Siegenthaler. And there are 2 not surprising things, but 2 things I learned through this experience about hospice. That hospice and palliative care, I always had the impression, it's that end stage of life, those last week or 2 weeks, because, they called in hospice, and I thought that was always the end, but it's really not the case. I mean, palliative care is, when someone has a diagnosis of, plus or minus a year, and then hospice care is about 6 months towards the end of life. And the one thing about hospice that basically you're not trying to cure anything when you enter hospice care. It's comfort care you maintain. I mean, my mother was taking her anti-seizure meds and her blood pressure meds, the same thing, but there was nothing, no curative type of care, restorative care. But so you can call them in, and I encourage that if anyone's facing a very serious, illness, please talk to them, see what services they offer, whether it's at home and whether, you move into the facility if needed, but you can always stay at home. And they do a lot with moving folks from the hospital that want to be at home when they pass. So that's another big not push, but that's one thing that hospice does. But the other thing that surprised me, because I had heard so many wonderful things about Siegenthaler, and we were fortunate enough to get my mom one of the suites there, was that in the 7 weeks that she was there, I noticed that there were rooms that it wasn't fully occupied. And I always wondered, just like, do people know that resource is available? I'd like to think that no one in the community needs that service, but I fear that they do. So, please, if I can get any message out, it would be that. It's just like, if you think you need something, contact hospice. Earlier the better,
I think it's a really good message. And I do think that there is a sense that hospice is the end. And so people are afraid of that, or they push it off as long as possible, because of course we don't want to see our loved ones go, and we don't want to get to that stage. but to recognize that it can actually start much sooner
Yes.
and make it a much easier, calmer transition for our loved ones, and to know that there are resources and people and places available that can make that journey as smooth as possible, not just at the end, but throughout the process.
And they're there for the families also, to let the families know what to expect as well as the patient.
To keep the families informed and to communicate.
Yep.
So if you're not familiar with that, I think that's just a great piece of information, and anything we can do to spread the word about what a great resource we have right here in our community is a good one.
Yes.
So as you get ready, because the Boilermaker is just a month away now, as you get ready for this next run and this very special run, we wish you all the best. I'm sure your mom is going to be right there watching the whole thing and cheering you on from wherever she is. And I really appreciate you taking some time to share your story, and we'll be cheering for you at the finish line.
Thank you. My pleasure.